I just want to talk about Rishi Sunak because we're asking this morning, how important is it for your self-worth to go to work? People have got some very strong views on this. We also spoke about this morning because Rishi Sunak wants to strip GPs of their power to sign people off work as part of a plan to tackle what he calls the UK's sick note culture. He says that benefits have become a lifestyle choice, causing a spiralling welfare bill. If the Conservatives win the general election, then replacing the GPs would be unspecified specialist work and health professionals, and they would issue these so-called fit notes. Sophia, this seems to have landed very well, actually, just judging by the comments coming in this morning. But he's got a point. When you've got 2.8 million people on benefits, it was 1.9 million people. We've gone up £900,000. We are spending so much money on this, more than on transport, for example.
And education.
It is unsustainable.
It is absolutely unsustainable. And we're actually really proud that the Prime Minister made that speech at the Centre for Social Justice.
Very good.
As we have a long history of kind of welfare reform. But this is really important because this is not about trying to be punitive, it's not about trying to be uncompassionate, it's compassionate to get people back to work, and it's the best thing for their future mental health. And obviously there'll be people who can't work and they will have exceptions and they will be supported as they need to be, but this is about focusing on what people can do rather than what people can't do. And that's why I think, as you said, it's been popular, because people realise that work is an important way for health to be repaired and that journey of recovery. And so I think both left and right realise that this bill is something we cannot afford to keep paying, and I think the Prime Minister is right to try and tackle it.
So it's very interesting. Labour hasn't responded to this whatsoever. The Prime Minister claims his plans were compassionate. Exactly what you're saying. They're compassionate. They don't lack compassion. Labour very quiet at the moment. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I agree with Sophia that it is a compassionate thing, an empowering thing to want people to be back to work and earning money and earning more than they'd be getting when they're out of work. I think we do have to look at sort of both ends of the problem, as it were. There was a massive survey on people's working lives done by the CIPD, the Professional Association for HR Professionals, last year, found that 13% of people in work say they feel miserable at work all or most of the time, like miserable, really having a horrible time at work, where they spend a third of their lives. 26% of people say they feel miserable sometimes.
I think, are they in the wrong job, or do they need to go and talk to their manager and say, look, I'm really unhappy? And also, do you have a right to be happy at work?
I think it's important that people are happy at work. I mean, I'm an employer, and I would want my staff to be happy, because then they're going to work harder, they're going to be more productive, they're going to take less time off sick. If you look at, I think it's generally agreed that the UK has quite a big problem with economic productivity. If you compare us to France or Germany or the US, the average British worker doesn't produce as much as the average worker in those countries. And research generally shows that quality of management is a big, not the only, but a big factor in that. I think it probably links to why so many people feel miserable at work as well. And to an extent why, there are so many people who are, depressed, struggle, emotionally not ready to engage with work. So I think we have to, I'm not saying to dismiss what Sunak has said, but also I think we have to look at quality of management, quality of people's working lives, and how we can improve that as well.
There's no doubt, if you work with your team and they feel empowered and they like going to work, their productivity rises. There is no doubt.
Of course, and also if they're paid a wage, which is, decent, higher than currently minimum wages are. So I do think there are lots of tenants. But I remember a conversation I had with my child when he was an adult, who travels the world playing with fast cars. And he told me he was sick and tired of airport lounges and getting on planes. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? You do a job that is your passion. There are very few people in life who get to do a job that is their passion. Shut up. Get on with it. And that's the key. Most people won't be loving the work they do, and unfortunately it's almost impossible that everyone will. But I feel there is a societal right for people to work and to contribute rather than just take
And can I just, on that point, Sophia, is there a sense of entitlement now? Because certainly I've been in this position as an employer where young people come in and say, well, I don't want to work that number of days a week. I want to do these hours. I want to work at home. Well, guess what? You can't. That's not the job.
I mean, I think there is a change in attitudes. Some of it may be positive, and we need to, adapt to that. People are potentially wanting a better work-life balance and taking care of their kind of well-being. I think the problem is when those things are seen as anathema to good mental health. Actually, work is an enabler of good mental health, and if people see it as something that you can only engage with once you have this kind of perfect equilibrium of managing stress, I think that is a problem. And I know Gen Z gets a lot of stick.
They do.
For being the ones who leave at 5:01 every day, and they do absolutely only the bare minimum. But so that I think is a problem.
But the more you put in, the more you get out. Surely,
I think it also differs from job to job, because in my experience, I don't find I work with a lot of young people, in their 20s, early 30s. They're all very engaged, keen to do well, believe in the work that we're doing. But it is quite engaging graduate work. Whereas if you're in a minimum wage job in a shop or something, and you're only being paid to work 8 hours and you're not being paid very much, I think it's well within your right to leave at 5 on the dot.
Have you just hit the nail on the head, though, about graduate jobs? Did Tony Blair encourage all of our children to go and get a degree?
50% to university.
So now they're out there, they can't get a graduate job, which is anywhere near what they dreamed or were sold that they might get, and so they're dissatisfied.
And actually, doesn't this go back to the bigger issue that if we upskilled people and said, if you have a vocation, for example, to be a carpenter, a builder, whatever it is that you love doing, an electrician, and you love your work, instead of going to university and studying golf course management, then that is not very useful for your time or your employment prospects.
I mean, absolutely. Of course, we want to get more people into fulfilling work that suits their interests and capabilities. What I would say is that even with the increase of people in going to university, it's still sort of half of young people. I think in the main, the people who are struggling at work, not really enjoying work, finding fulfilling work, wouldn't be in that half of the population. It'd still be much more people with lower educational attainment and outcomes, lower income backgrounds. I think that I'd be sort of pretty confident that that's the case. Obviously not in all cases. I think there'll be a mixture of both. But I think, I don't think we can sort of attribute the rise of university education to people's disillusionment with work.
No, just in terms of how this is going to play going forward to the election, I'm getting the sense that people really like what he's saying. They think this has landed incredibly well. Does it move the dial?
I don't know if it moves the dial enough. I do think he is on the right track, and I think the question is going to be the delivery of these policies. We talked about GPs not having the fit note power. Who is going to be delivering that? That detail still needs to be filled in. So they said something like an unspecified specialist work. Well, that's too nebulous. I don't know what that is. Who is this, and who's paying for that, and where does it come out of, and where is it going to be based? Exactly, and whether that comes into force in time for people to feel the effects of it. And maybe those details will come, and I look forward to seeing them. But I think the delivery is key for this. So I think that will be what shifts the dial.
There's also a question of how long it's going to take to have any impact, and the election will be this year, and you're talking about things that will take a long time to.
Well, absolutely, and of course it will be in the manifesto, and after the election. Just in terms of Rishi Sunak and trying to move the dial, we were trying to think of 5 pledges actually in terms of how you judge Rishi Sunak. One of those is getting the planes to Rwanda, and here we go again. So Rishi Sunak has insisted his Rwanda plan will finally get through Parliament on Monday. Now that is some bold promise. He says we will sit there and vote until it is done. Amazingly, that scheme was 2 years ago. It was announced by Boris Johnson, and I feel every single day of that in those last 2 years. I've spoken about it pretty much every single day. I found this really interesting. He said, everyone's patience with this has run thin. Mine has run thin. And so our intention now is to get this done on Monday. No more prevarication, no more delay. Why didn't they do it last week?
Well, I think it's because the Lords keep trying to amend it
amendments
at late stages when they don't normally amend bills. So
but they could have sat there all night, couldn't they? They could have sat there all night playing parliamentary ping pong, send it back to the Lords. No, we overturned that, and it could have gone through.
They could have done. I mean, maybe when we talk about getting people back to work, maybe they should say MPs should sit longer hours. I don't know if that would go down quite as well. But yeah, I think the political will needs to be all the way behind this bill, because yes, there is controversy around it, but it is so important that we have this deterrent, because let's face it, people are dying coming to this country, and we need to find a way to stop it. At the moment, this is the only tool in the box. I'm very welcome to other opportunities for solving this problem, but so far I haven't seen them.
No, where do you stand on this? Let me tell you what these 4 amendments were, including exemptions for Afghans who work with the British. Rwanda should not be declared safe until an independent monitoring body has actually decided this and verified this. Don't ignore international law and jurisdictions of UK courts to be reinserted. How much of this is the House of Lords just trying to assert its dominance?
I mean, I wouldn't be able to explain the motivations of people in the House of Lords on their behalf. Tragically, I have very little engagement with peers of the realm.
Really?
But, you know, I think it's become a bit of a sort of political problem for Sunak, just because of the sheer amount of time it's taken. It's sort of setting him up as somebody who doesn't get things done. Maybe it will happen on Monday or whenever it is the vote's taking place. Maybe it won't, but I think the amount of time it's taken already, it's probably been more trouble to him than it's going to be worth, particularly when you think it's not going to affect a huge number of people, and there are probably, you know, bigger issues facing the country in terms of, you know, the people who are going to be voting in a general election's day-to-day lives.
I think that if he can get this right, it will be absolutely huge. If he can bring in the deterrent and people see a reduction in illegal migration, it will be a huge vote swinger. And so I do think it is really important. But on those amendments, what's interesting, some of them are tweaks. The Afghan interpreters, I think I would support that.
So
that's an important thing. Some of them are wrecking amendments. They want bringing ways to bring down the whole bill. So I think there's a big kind of difference between them there.
So interestingly, Rwanda now says it's ready to take 30,000 asylum seekers in the first 5 years. It's going to cost us £5 billion. Also, the government has got other agreements in place, or they hope to have in place, with places like the Ivory Coast, Costa Rica and Botswana. I've remembered the 5th pledge, debt falling.
Yeah, and I've just looked up a really handy tracker.
Oh, yeah.
And the only 2 that they've actually got on track are the halving inflation and growing the economy. Reducing debt is actually in the red.
We're at 99.5% of GDP, so
cut NHS waiting list times is some progress, but I don't know where they're getting that progress from. And then stop the boats at the moment is a fail, of course.
It's a fail because we've had 6,265 people in so far.